Welcome back, folks. It's another episode of It's About Payroll, episode 191. We got an amazing guest. And before that, though, what is going on, Walt? How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Brian. Just glad to be here. Another opportunity, another day,
All
another
right.
dollar, as they say.
That's right. Today's guest is someone who sits at the intersection of banking, payments, and payroll innovation. Trent Sorbe, if I'm am I pronouncing that right?
Long E Sorby, but you're close, Brian.
Sorby. All right. Trent Sorbe is the Chief Payments Officer. Ooh, I love the title. Chief Payments Officer at First International Bank and Trust, where he leads CodaPay, one of the nation's leading ACH and electronic payments originators, supporting over 100,000 payroll clients. Wow. With more than 3 decades in financial services, Trent has founded fintech companies, holds multiple patents. Ooh, and is a trusted voice on how real-time payments and modern funding models are reshaping payroll. His perspectives is especially valuable as the industry faces both a talent shift and a technology reckoning. Excuse me today as I jumbled through this intro. Trent, how you doing today, sir?
Good, Brian. How you doing today? I'm so glad to be here.
Amazing. Likewise, we're glad to have you. So tell us a little bit, give us your origin story. Let's start at the beginning. How did you first get into banking and payments and ultimately pulled you into payroll?
Yeah, it's an interesting start to my career. So right out of college, I actually went to work for the FDIC, which is, of course, one of the federal regulators of banking here in the U.S. I did that, got my start really there for about the first third of my career. And, I wasn't meant to be a lifelong bureaucrat, but it was a great experience because it lets you see so many different situations and so many different environments, and you just learn a lot. And being here in the
Amen.
Midwest, I'm actually in South Dakota. And if you don't know much about South Dakota, it's usually hunting, fishing, and payment cards. And so it's one of those three things that is the economic driver of South Dakota. And
That's
so
hilarious.
going back to kind of my regulatory days, I spent a lot of time in banks up here in South Dakota, got to see consumer payments sort of from a regulatory perspective. And I said, well, this is kind of interesting, and just sort of stayed in it. And eventually, like so common among regulators, they hop over to the banker side of the desk, having spent a lot of time. My old Honda Accord had 200 and some odd thousand miles on it, so it was time to kind of maybe come off the road a little bit and spend a little time at home for a change. And so anyway, I've always been in consumer payments from that point forward, almost always on the banker side of the desk. But as it relates to electronic forms of payment, that's really what I've been doing now for coming up on 33 years now.
Wow.
Wow,
Amazing.
that's amazing. So, one of the talking points we had for you was about the payroll industry and how the professionals are aging out, right? So that means that a lot of us are nearing retirement with very few young professionals entering the field. How does that impact payroll service providers, especially when it comes to like continuity, service quality, and retention?
And maybe, you know, before I go there, Walt, maybe it makes sense to maybe give you a little background on CodaPay, because I think that'll kind of shape our view of the industry from a payroll standpoint and kind of the way we're looking at things. So CodaPay is the payments division of First International Bank and Trust, a North Dakota-based family-owned community bank, about 5.5 billion in assets, 675-ish employees. About 7 years ago, they acquired an ACH processor called Intercept, rebranded it CodaPay, and now the bank, through CodaPay, supports roughly 3,300 payroll providers, payroll processors, service bureaus, that sort of thing,
Wow.
operating on a couple dozen different SaaS softwares, sort of depending on what their particular software of choice is. They're doing payroll for about 107,000 employers across the country, all 50 states, basically all use cases. Concentrate a little more in the small and sort of medium sized businesses. And so that's really what we do. And we're really the engine driving funds transfers, behind all of that payroll activity. So, this year we should move, or I guess as we close the year, it's the very last day of the year today. We should end the year, approaching $70 billion in payroll transaction activity. So,
Wow.
we're doing volume at significant scale, but all of that activity we're starting to see, to your point, I think Brian, or I'm sorry, it's Walt, it was your question. What we're starting to see is that the payroll industry, and I'm not a payroll person, I've been a banker my whole life. I'm about moving the money, not necessarily processing or setting up the payroll. But nonetheless, from our vantage point, where we're working with all of these payroll companies, we are seeing a generational shift in the business. People that are my age or slightly older are saying, "Hey, I'm going to hang this up. It's time to sell out to a big provider." It's
Mm,
I can't find young folks that want to make payroll, how they want to be an entrepreneur. And so we're seeing this, and it's driving some consolidation, and it's changing sort of the dynamic in the way in which companies we work with are sort of viewing their business. And I think, you know, I I I still believe it's a very vibrant business. I think there's tremendous future and opportunity. Payroll's not going anywhere. Let's just accept that right now. And so, but I think the industry is calibrating to a change in just sort of the demographic of the companies supporting payroll. So I hope that answered the question. It's
yeah.
very interesting to watch.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, it definitely is. And it's a recurring theme. And I was just sharing with Walt like how nicely this is gonna segue because we just recorded with someone that was also talking about payrolls aging out. It's been a recurring theme for us to talk about how, we need that backfill. We need the newer generation, these new grads, and even folks that are even willing to pivot to be like, hey, payroll is a career path.
And I think that's where technology, I think, kind of going where I think you're going, is that that's really where technology is going to start to play. I think as you look at old payroll systems that feel antiquated, especially to a younger demographic, this is where I think the opportunity lies, is to think about the next generation of technology supporting payroll. And I think when you think
Yes.
about that, then you're going to start seeing that next generation start to find it pretty interesting, right? And so that's where I hold out a lot of hope in where this industry is going, is that I think technology is going to breed a lot of interest, and ultimately we're going to go. And I think we all stand to benefit by that.
Yep.
What do you think payroll providers have to change technology wise to attract that new generation?
Look, I think we have got to think about payroll as a real time transaction. We have to think about payroll almost as a daily transaction. It has to be extremely customizable. The software has to be extremely versatile. Of course, it has to be cloud based and significantly API driven. And I think we have to start thinking about where stablecoins fall in this thing too. And
Ooh.
so I think all of that stuff is going to breed a lot of interest, because I think the industry is ripe for this sort of technology. And I think in the end, we're all going to continue to get paid. How we get paid, when we get paid, how quickly we get paid, that's where the innovation is going to happen, I think.
Wow.
And yeah, Walt and I were just talking about this, and I had read some article about, and gosh, I'm so mad that I didn't save it somehow, but it just mentioned about a real time payment, something moving real time, and I'm the only thing I'm afraid of, and you're right, by the way, everything you said about the it needs to move in real time. It's very true. I mean, we're almost there now, right, with the daily pay and the earned wage access of it all. But what I get worried about as a payroll practitioner is, can we keep up with that movement compliance wise,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have to, like, how do we reconcile for compliance in real time? That is going to be, I think that's the question that has to be front of mind for payroll folks, and I mean for employees, really, because I mean ultimately it impacts the employee, not the payroll provider, the payroll person, because at the end of the year, when you go file your taxes, if you haven't paid correctly, it's going to ultimately impact the recipient, not the distributor. Well, maybe in some cases also the employer, tax wise. So like that's what's got to be captured. So yeah, it's a really interesting conversation that, yeah, technology still is challenged with, like,
I
I
really
because I think we go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please
No, no, no.
finish. I, I think about this a lot. I'm a banker, right? I'm a banker supporting payroll,
Mhm.
and I don't think we have a lot of regulatory advantages as a bank. It's not easy. But the one thing that is different is that we typically have two sets of rules. One's the federal rules and one's the state of North Dakota, because that's where we're based.
Mm,
You payroll folks, you got 50 different sets of rules on all kinds of things. Don't
yep.
forget, even the money transmitter stuff
More than that
is
sometimes. Yeah.
is unbelievable. But
Yeah.
all of the wage and hour laws, I mean, that's real, and that's a heavy weight to bear. I continue to believe that technology can solve for a lot of these things. I think this is where opportunity lies, is how do I manage, a
Yes.
payroll process that complies with 50 plus states, territories, et cetera, wage and hour laws. How do I think about overseas payments, all those sorts of things, 1099s? I, it is by no means simple, but at the same time, I think I still hold out a lot of belief that technology can solve for a lot of these things. And I also think, to your point, where I think opportunity is going to lie is that when you
Hmm.
start to really think about a real time environment, I like to think about it from the employer standpoint. It's not hard to move money in real time to employees. It's not
Nope.
difficult. There's lots of rails to do that today,
Yep.
right? To me, the interesting part is what optionality can we give an employer to be able to fund on demand almost their payroll event, and to do that whenever they want to, and to do it potentially 1 minute before I release all those payroll files to the end employees. There's where I think you can start to de-risk and maybe delve deeper down into the small businesses in terms of
Hmm.
opportunities that may felt very risky to third-party payroll processors because they don't have deep balance sheets, and there's a risk that payroll isn't going to be covered, and we all understand float risk involved in this business. If we start thinking about real-time payments, particularly the employer payment in, now all of a sudden I think you can open up a new market there of folks that felt a bit underserved in the
Mhm.
payroll space because they didn't, the small company that does the landscaping at my home that has 5 employees and he's just starting out, I think it's going to be challenging in many cases for him to find good, reliable payroll processing. I
Mhm.
really think the funding mechanism is going to start driving this thing. And ultimately, our vision is we use a concept called windowless payroll. Like, let's get out of this thing like, oh, we got to meet the 3 o'clock cutoff time because if we don't do that, the downstream effect is we're going to miss all of these important timelines for payroll to happen. Let's fund it on, I mean, today's New Year's Eve, right? Let's fund it on
Yeah.
tomorrow. Chris, on New Year's Day, let's fund payroll tomorrow. And then let's have payroll go out tomorrow on New Year's Day at 11 p.m. when there's not a bank in the country that's open. But I
Mhm.
still want to fund payroll. I want to fund Christmas bonuses. I want to fund spot bonuses. I think ultimately what's happening is we're seeing a compression of a very clunky timeline of Fed cutoff times, federal holidays, all that kind of stuff that now we're able to kind of solve for that and think about these sort of, I would say instead of 3 or 4 days payroll event, it's a 3 or 4 minute payroll event. That's kind of the stuff we're thinking about. Sorry,
Wow.
long-winded answer.
No, I love that. I
Amazing.
love that. Love that. There was so much that you said. We want to ask you so many questions just off of that, there. But for the smaller payroll service providers, how do you think their long-term survival outlook is in a world that's dominated by those larger, gusto style tech forward platforms? How can the smaller providers realistically differentiate themselves?
I think they have to look at it much like we think about differentiating ourselves back to the payroll space. I want I want our clients to think of us as more than just the ACH mover, right? So what are the services I can wrap around the payroll event? We have a number of them in process. I'm always excited to talk about. If I'm the payroll processor, I'm thinking about that as well. So I'm thinking about how can I differentiate myself from, to your example, Augusto? How can I drive, in my case, thinking about it from my perspective, how can I drive financial services potentially inside of the payroll event? How can I deliver life insurance products? How can I deliver different types of employee benefits and stuff that I can be very quick to bring to market that the large providers, especially the sort of cloud-based fintechs, might not be able to do as quickly or as nimbly, or maybe I can do it a lot more affordably. And maybe my end employer doesn't need to be a payroll expert and have their own sort of in-house person. I think in the end, this is an SMB business, right? For my client base. And I think they got to look at the needs of those SMBs, which are really much like underserved consumers, and say, how can I bring more services to them? Many of our clients are CPA firms doing payroll sort of as an ancillary service. Well, let's drive tax benefit. Let's drive tax work into what they're doing. They're already going to do that. But, I really think it's about a multi-tenant. How many tentacles can I get into my client to make that relationship something they could never rebuild by pulling pieces and parts from, cloud-based fintechs?
Hmm.
Wow. So
This is
talking
where
to
you guys.
speed.
This is where you guys can tell me I'm crazy. It's
No,
okay.
you're
No,
not,
no,
man.
you're not.
This is very inspiring, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Again, we talk about this stuff all the time. Me and Walt talk these kind of like beyond the podcast. We'll have these conversations. Hey, I was thinking about this. How crazy is this? And
Hmm.
and we'll just wow, and speaking of the speed, what are the processors still missing about real cash flow and the cost of slow ACH? Right, not just for the employer part, as you talked about, but employees and the processors.
Yeah, and I think many of them, and this is actually, I draw a lot of comparisons to the banking space here. Many of our clients say, look, I can never do that because my underlying software that I'm using isn't ready to support that. And the company I'm using does lots of different things and they never want to put time into their payroll solution. So I'm always stuck with archaic systems, right? Banks say the same thing in many cases about the core processing systems that we run on. It's very, very similar. So I think one of the challenges our clients are facing is, how do I get, my software providers to up their game in terms of their capabilities inside that payroll software. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't look. It's not going to be easy, because in the end, if I'm building SaaS software and I'm providing lots of solutions out there for lots of different use cases, I probably am going to look at my payroll solution and say, look, that's going to fall down the priority list a little bit from other things I need to build as a software company. That's what we see oftentimes. I
Yeah.
hope ultimately that CodaPay can convince these softwares that we can drive a lot of interesting products back through them, a lot of interesting solutions. We can take some of the laboring ore off of the software and say, you know what? I'm going to do more than just ACH funds movement. I'm going to drive financial products back through you. I'm going to drive, ancillary products and wellness products and stuff like that. And I'll take a little of the laboring ore off of you, and you sort of integrate with me. So I think, again, my vantage point, how can we come with a little more technology so that ultimately the payroll technology doesn't have to do everything? There's a
Hmm.
marriage there, again, just from my vantage point, that we have to do with the SaaS companies that are out there building payroll processing solutions.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I love it.
So, in terms of real time funding and the risk that may be associated with that, how does that shift the risk equation for processors or companies, especially when they're working with the smaller businesses that may not have those strong financials and are predictable cash flow?
So you think about that. What does an employer hate doing? They hate calling or going to their bank and initiating a wire to fund their payroll every
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks. It is
Yep.
annoying, right? They
Yeah.
have to do it because the CodaPays of the world and the processor, who in many cases is standing behind the employer back to us, is saying, look, I need to have good funds. I need good funds that I can depend on before I'm going to release all of this payroll, right? The interesting thing about real-time payments is that they are like mini wires, except they're a lot less expensive. They don't require bank business hours. They don't require you to call somebody, fill out a form, do anything like that. And they're good funds. And so, literally, and we're going to see this is happening. You're going to be able to see, I think, that rung of employers that felt underserved in the payroll space, they're all of a sudden going to be very serviceable because the processor can stay in a good funds position. That employer could drop their payroll file. I'm going to sit on it until I get that real time funding event from them. And if it happens on New Year's Day at 11 o'clock p.m., no problem. It'll come in and out it goes, because I know that real time funding is actually good funds. It is not, you can't pull it back, right? It is a mini wire. And
Hmm.
so I can depend on that, and I can depend on it 24/7, 365. Now
Wow.
that's going to take a lot of the pressure off the processors who are thinking like, I can't go that deep down to that rung of employers because that creates a risk for me that they'll miss payroll and I have to cover it back to the bank. In a real-time funding standpoint, I think we can solve for a lot of that and not create more risk for the PEOs and the processors out there that are doing this business.
Wow.
That's where it gets interesting to me.
Wow. Man, you're
Yeah.
speaking my language. Trent. Yeah, this is amazing stuff.
Because and only because, and why I want to speak to what Walt was just saying. He's speaking his language because he's very customer. Not that I'm not, but he's very customer service driven, and often is advocating for that customer service piece. How do we better serve our recipients? How do we better serve the employee? And we even talked about how off cycles, is it customer service or is it just fixing a mess? And it's really customer service, right? Like how do you get that to them quicker? And yeah, so you mentioned something about windowless payroll, and I wrote it down, and it's in our notes. And what is that, and why is it such an important concept for the future of payroll funding?
You guys know this space so well, but you also know that when you drop a payroll, or when one of your clients drops a payroll file to us, or the software does, I
Mhm.
should say,
Yeah.
we're going to look at that end employer. We're going to say, okay, what's the level of risk we're willing to take on this employer and the processor that's standing behind them? If in a situation where we're not willing to take a lot of risk, what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to set you up on these windows, right? We're going to set you up on a 4-day window where we're going to initiate the debit of an ACH. We're going to pull it in from your bank. We're going to see it's here. We're going to wait because you have a right to pull it back. Once we know we're in good funds, then we're going to release it out. Meanwhile, that started on Tuesday and it ended on Friday when it hit the bank account. And inside of that, if there's a federal holiday, well, can't do anything there because the Fed's not
Yep.
open. If it's after a cutoff time, let's just say 3 p.m. or something like that, well, we're stuck till tomorrow anyway. All of this compresses in a real time environment because all of the things I just described can happen at midnight on New Year's Day. Um, there isn't a Fed cutoff time, and as long as you give me the instructions on where to send it, I'll just pend it, and you employer client in our case, you decide when you want to send it. If you want to send it, if you want to drop it to me at 8 a.m. on a Friday, I'll release it at 8:01 on a Friday. Or if you want to drop it in the middle of the night, it really doesn't matter because we're in this 24/7, 365 space, and we get rid of all those clunky old windows that I was just talking about where
Wow. Yeah.
you have to get it to me at a certain time, and the Fed
Yeah.
has to be open. And if there's a federal holiday, you're sort of screwed. You hope you accounted for that. That's
Yes.
all gone. That's all gone now.
Wow. Because that's saying a lot because I know one of the things that, and Brian, correct me if I'm not articulating this properly, but in payroll, one of the things that we often hear is like we need to receive the funds in soon enough in order to be able to guarantee payment to the
Yes.
employee by check date. So we need to process by 12 noon on Wednesday to guarantee that payment is received by Friday.
Friday.
If there's no
Yeah.
holidays, like you were mentioning, Trent, you know what I'm saying? So that's very interesting that CodaPay is doing that because, like you said, that's a windowless payroll, and that's something that I'm excited to hear about. What do you
Well,
got to say, Brian?
yeah, I gotta hold on for a second on your next question because are you saying that you have eliminated these windows, that you're able to operate outside of these windows?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and of course, there's a couple of contingencies. One is employer has to be banking at a bank that supports real-time payments. Now, the penetration of real-time payments, whether Fed now or the clearinghouse, is growing by the day. I mean, it's going to be universal. So,
Yeah.
roughly, last time we looked, approximately 60% of our employers are we're pulling their payroll from banks that could be pushing it to us in real time. So, and that's probably a year old data too. So I'm going to guess it's 70% now. So we're
Wow.
starting to see that penetration. Now remember, these are all push payments, and so employer has to initiate it, whether it's their online banking or whatever solution their bank has. But if they're in the real time network, just like First International is, They could send it to us in real time. It does not
Wow.
matter the day of the week. So that's a little friction today, but that friction is going to go away as time goes on. Um,
Absolutely. I agree.
and like I said,
So
the
is it
interesting
real
thing for
time?
me is not just the convenience of the employer, but now the new employers that we can service that we would have never touched because of the perceived risk created by the possibility that they might not be able to make payroll. Now it's sort of like, look, if you don't send it to us, I'm not going to send it out. No risk for me. Bad situation for you, employer, but it's not like I'm standing behind it anymore. And I think that opens up a new tranche of a market for people.
Absolutely.
That's the perfect segue to my next
Yeah.
question for you, Trent. The earned wage access, right? EWA, as I like to call it.
We go the EWA, yeah.
Ewa.
But it's gained traction over the last few years, but not without its downsides. I think there's still some talks about it being regulated and all this
Yeah.
different things. So how does windowless payroll avoid those kinds of pitfalls that traditional earned wage access models go through now?
We can have a debate all day long about whether EWA is a loan, right? And we've seen even the
Hmm.
regulatory wins. One day it's a loan at the CFPB, the next day it's not a loan, it feels like. And then it is, and
Hmm.
then it's not.
Mhm.
Um, if I'm an employer sitting on the border of New York and Connecticut and, up there, I'm going to be able to support EWA in New York, but I can't touch it in Connecticut. Well, what am I going to do? I got employees on both sides of the border, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. So I believe earned wage access is a service. I don't believe it's a relationship. It's a service, but it's a service that brings an element of friction to it, right? You've got
Hmm.
now, last time I looked, 30 some odd states with EWA legislation. Very few of them look like the other ones. And so you've got that challenge. Some states it's a loan, some states it's not.
Yep.
Um, and I think in the end, set aside the argument of whether it's a loan. I still fundamentally believe that the payday shouldn't feel like a loan. Payday shouldn't feel like an event where I'm paying someone back and facing a big deduction out of the wages, right? I still fundamentally believe that. Like I think people look at the payday event, that is my biggest financial event of my month, right? And in many cases, that's their primary financial event. To see a
Hmm.
big deduction out of that on the payday, I don't know. It feels disappointing. I think for a lot of employees. Now I understand why they do it, and I understand the use case. I understand the value prop. Right? I had a big deduction because I needed it 3 days before that. Totally get
Right.
that. Going back to your question, Walt, where we think windowless fits in is that we're thinking about, if I speeded up the paycheck and I speeded up the time between the end of the pay period and the delivery of wages, almost to the point where I can cut it down to minutes. Does that negate the need to feel like I have to sort of borrow from myself during the
Mm,
pay period?
mhm,
And when you go about an earned wage access product, there's almost always some element of cost. There is a way to do it free. The way to do it free is slow, and nobody goes to EWA for a slow funds delivery, right? So
Hmm.
there's almost always a cost for expediency.
mhm.
And I understand the use case and I see the value prop, but if I can accelerate the actual payday event and not dig into the accrued wages, does that take a
Hmm.
little of the pressure off of these
Wow.
employees? And so we think about, how do we embed financial services? How do we embed digital wallets inside of HCM software? So I literally can see you punch out on Friday and fund it later that day and
Mhm.
wait for the employer to sort of catch up and the processing process to catch up. But I feel confident enough that I could accelerate that payroll event and maybe take a little of the financial pressure off of the employee and do it
Wow.
in a way that doesn't feel like a loan, doesn't get caught up in 50 state regulations. We always say all
Yep.
I'm really doing is I just want to supercharge the direct deposit. That's really what we want to do. We want to supercharge the
Hmm.
direct deposit and compress the payroll initiation with the payroll delivery. That's where we think our niche lies.
Wow. Man, that's amazing.
It impacts so many things, right? And
Yeah.
before we close this out, it makes me think of the real time payments forces accurate pay punches. So it forces employees fix those punches. You want to get paid in real time, you're going to have to make sure you've punched in and out accurately. It may force a little bit on managers as well, but a lot of systems do it in, the employees can fix it on their own, but it changes that dynamic. You're not sitting on corrections that have to be made for 2 weeks, right? They got to get done date in real time. Like, hey, I just missed the punch. Fix it right now for me. You
I,
know?
and we see it less at the individual employee level. We see it from processors and employers that say, boy, I screwed up that batch. That batch was all wrong. I need to scrap it and send you a new batch. Well, it's 2:59 in the afternoon on a Friday. You got 1 minute to get it to me, or you're going to have a problem. I can't get it out same day, and now you're looking at delivery on Monday. Real-time
Yep.
payments throws all that out the window. You can
Yes.
recognize the error and initiate a new batch to me and initiate a new funding event at
Crazy.
midnight. It doesn't matter. And so when
Wow.
we're all scrambling because we're working with these difficult windows during the day, and all of a
Wow.
sudden it takes a little of the pressure off of that and says, look, you don't have to scramble. This thing runs 24/7, 365. And in the end, if you mess up and I'm holding your payroll until noon on Friday, for anybody on real-time payments, I can get it to them at 12:01. So
Wow.
you really, to me, I try not to focus only on the end user benefit. I think about all the capabilities it opens up for processors and employers to sort of
Yeah.
take the pressure off these sort of archaic deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely
Agreed.
does, man. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, agreed. So as payroll becomes more real time and on demand, how do you see processor client relationships evolving? Do processors become more strategic partners than service vendors?
Great question. And I have a habit, because I'm not a lifelong payroll person, of sort of using the terms interchangeably, I guess. And that's a shame on me. I get corrected all the time. I do believe that the the end company doing payroll for the employer, right? Whatever you want to call them. I
Yep.
believe the Windows payroll concept is exactly the differentiation that we were talking about at the start of the pod. I think all of a sudden, if you can do that, it's going to be very, very hard for that employer to feel like they're going to get better service by going on to some online service, trying to read the FAQs and call an 800 number that they sit on hold forever and ever, because it's not. And now they're getting service and capabilities and flexibility that I think that's what we want to do. And that's where I was talking about before, is like, if we can come along in our capabilities, make it a little easier for the software providers and the end preparers of payroll, I think we've created a pretty interesting value prop that sort of saves this niche of the industry, so we don't all jump out to the enterprise solutions, the super expensive ones,
Mm-hmm.
or we don't all jump online and put what is a very, very important process for your employees in the hands of, you know, a fintech that you don't know where they are, right? And I'm not knocking that solution, but my point is, I think we're creating a value prop that there's an alternative that you can say, no, 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 I couldn't possibly leave that preparer, because look at all the service I'm getting and the capabilities I'm getting that I would never get as, sort of a SaaS solution with an online provider, that's built for one way of doing everything. That's just, again, you're welcome to jump in and say, Trent, you're completely crazy,
No,
but
no,
that's
no.
sort of the way we're looking at it. And look, this is our vested interest. We're surviving on SMBs, supporting payrolls for SMBs. We have to find a way to continue to prop this industry up and support its growth. That's where we are.
Amazing.
Wow. So, Trent, last question that we have for you, or that I have for you. Looking ahead, 2 to 5 years from now, what will competitive positioning look like for payroll providers? And what will separate those who thrive from those who will potentially fall behind?
Now, I'm coming at this, I admit my bias. I'm coming at this as a banker, and I'm coming at this from as a financial services provider, right? I believe that the payroll event, because it is a critical financial event, the closest it marries to a good financial product, I think, is a differentiating factor. And so, what I believe is that payroll processors said, look, I push payroll. I don't care where they bank. The bank part of it is not important to me as long as I can get an ACH to them. I get that, right? But I also believe that you have an opportunity there to take a payroll event that's so important and drive a financial services product married to it and create a very seamless experience. You have a financial relationship now. And that's where I go back to I don't view EWA as a relationship, I view it as a service. I think in the end, we can marry banking and payroll and make a really interesting value prop for an end consumer. And so I think, Walt, go back to your question. This is where I believe the opportunity lies. I think when you can start to look at your paycheck event, your payroll event, and think of it as a financial services event, and have that be completely synergistic and available in real time, boy, it makes it a lot more appealing than a 2-day direct deposit. And I know we always thought 2-day direct deposit, boy, that's fast, right? That's amazing. Those days are gone. We need to supercharge that, compress those, and get money in the hands of people quickly with good, responsible products. This is where payroll and banking are going to meet. And from my vantage point, that's where things are interesting for us.
Love it.
I love that.
Love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for
Brian,
sure.
do you have anything before we?
Only if you, Trent, you mentioned CFPB earlier. What is that?
The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Got it.
So you're talking about a federal agency primarily focused on financial services. Doesn't really dip into payroll much other than they have a heavy interest in EWA because that there is a financial component to that. But this is really now the CFPB's influence has changed as the political winds change, but it is the sort of front and center federal agency that's looking in their charter looking out to make sure financial products are good for consumers. And so when they say something about a financial product, it catches the industry the industry takes note.
Yeah.
If you look at their history of EWA, they have done this with EWA. Don't like it, it's a loan. Okay, test it, we'll see what it is. Nope, we've decided it's a loan. Now it's not a loan.
Wow.
That's tough for all of us to react to. And you guys get it. Payroll deals with some crazy state and federal regulations too.
All the time.
Yep.
All right. Wow. It's amazing, man. I think we need to have you back at some point in the future because this is going to evolve. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Open door.
Yeah, for sure. So we love to end our show with this or that, just a better, way to get to know you beyond all the pay talk and things. We're going to pick either or both, neither, just to have fun and have some stories. Walt, you want to get the first three? I get the last?
Yeah, let's do it. So do you prefer a great song or a great speech?
That's a good one.
That is an excellent one. I would definitely prefer a great song. I dig into lyrics. I like to read the lyrics. I like to read the poetry behind the song. So it's definitely a song for me.
Nice. Okay.
It's my Fleetwood. Hey, it's my Fleetwood Mac coming out there.
Oh man, I saw them live one time, and oh wow! Just a story spur, right? My wife and my daughter are fans, and they're like, "Oh, just come with us." So and I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll tag along." I'm thinking it's gonna be on my phone, and what they rock the house. I mean, what a show! Made me a fan, and holy cow! So yeah.
Nice, man. All right. So, do you prefer steak and potatoes or salmon and salad?
Dude, I'm in the Midwest. Okay,
so steak and potatoes.
I mean, right now I'm sitting in Iowa and I live in South Dakota. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guess, but no, it's definitely bring me the beef and bring me the potatoes.
Gotcha. All right, my last one before I pass it to Brian. Number 3, do you prefer a speed first innovation or a risk first design?
Speed, man. Always speed. Give me 80% of the way there. No, I mean, anybody from my world that knows me and listens to this, they're going to answer that question before I even have a chance. But give me 80% there. I don't know what I don't know. So why am I trying to? We'll risk rationalize later. Right now, find me a solution and see what the customers think. And then I'm going to wrap all the risk management around it for sure. I'm a banker, right? We're not crazy at all. But man, we gotta test it, build it, and then adjust, and we'll finish the last 20% as we learn more from what our users are telling us. Awesome. Oh, you really hit me. Well, all that stuff, Walt's right. That was on my soapbox. Those were easy.
Right? All right. Deep sea fishing or fishing on a quiet lake?
what does that right there tell you right there?
Oh,
So that is a walleye caught in Iowa, and I am very much a lake guy. I've never lived on
got
a
it.
coast. I've never lived next to an ocean. I deep sea
Okay,
fish. I like it's fun, but no, you give me a boat and a lake and a couple beers and
nice.
a beautiful summer day. I'm good to go.
Oh, that sounds
Man, that
good.
sounds great. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Training others or being trained?
Training others. I'm at a point now. Like, look at this hair. This is about mentoring folks and finding that next generation of folks that want to do cool stuff
Yeah,
in this space.
yes.
So,
I
you know,
love
I
that.
I have a career coach right now, and her whole engagement with me is about figuring out where that legacy sits and how we maximize
Wow,
that legacy. So, this is about mentoring the up and comers and getting them excited about financial services.
man.
Wow,
I
man.
love that. Last one. Great TV show or a great documentary?
Ooh, that one's actually tough. I'm going to go with the TV show,
Okay.
because I'm a pretty avid reader, and so most of the stuff I don't really rely on a documentary. I'm going to read about it,
You're gonna read
but
about it.
my entertainment is going to come from a show, and so yeah, I'm gonna lean there on show. I'm just
What
catching
have
up.
you
By the way,
seen? There
right
you
now
go.
I'm dead middle of Arrested Development. I never watched Arrested Development.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Really?
never watched it coming through.
Wow.
Me neither.
And so I am. I
Is it
love
good? How
Jason
you like it?
Bateman. It's A plus. Jason Bateman's the
Yeah,
best.
I'm gonna check it
Yeah.
out.
It's hilarious, man.
Fun fact, I just heard the group Arrested Development on one of my favorite podcasts. It's called Drink Champs,
Yeah.
and they brought that up, and they actually settled out of court
I'm
for
sure they
that
did.
name. Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yep. I know.
It
I've
probably it
yeah.
probably lifted both boats, right?
Yes,
There
for
it didn't
sure.
hurt. It didn't hurt the
Nope.
brand of the other one at all.
No,
No.
but you gotta kind of
Absolutely.
give respect where it's due, right?
Sure.
Trent, amazing, man. Thank you so much for
Yes.
coming on. And
Thank you. Thank you.
the juice was absolutely worth the squeeze, and the
Good.
wait was worth it. Thank you to your team for keeping and like following up and staying up with us to reschedule and get this on the calendar. Anything, where do folks go to CodaPay to learn more?
Yeah, look, just go to the website codapay.com, but we're really active on all the
Amazing.
socials. LinkedIn, we're super active. So
Okay.
you can read about all the crazy thoughts I have in all over the place if you want to.
Will do.
Awesome.
Thank you so
All
much,
right.
folks. As we end it off, hold on for us, Trent. I want to end it off on this great quote. The only way to discover the limits of the possible is to go beyond them into the impossible. Arthur C. Clarke said that. And thank you, folks. We love you. Please share and subscribe and go check out CodaPay and tell a friend and tell a friend. We love you. Bye bye.